Let me ask Mr. Robert Green to join me up here on stage. Robert's a longtime friend of mine. I've known him since the early 90s, a longtime friend of Synergis. And let me...
Back when you were like 15 or something, right?
Yeah, back when I was about 12. So Robert literally wrote the book on CAD management. It's called Expert CAD Management, the complete guide. He writes for Catalyst. He does consulting as Robert Green Consulting, based out of Atlanta. So training, programming, CAD management consulting, you name it. That's Bob's thing. He's legendary in the CAD management community. And I'll turn it over to you, Bob.
Oh, thanks. What's up with that? So thanks. Is that too loud? Good? All right. Awesome. So we'll kind of get to know each other, as we go through some of the talk. But I can remember back a company that I was working for, and I would have started there in about 1989. And they said, we need somebody to take care of all this CAD stuff. And I was stupid me. I kind of raised my hand and volunteered. And so after a few months in that, it kind of came to the point where we had about 30,000 files. And things were getting lost, and I don't know if I'm seeing any heads nodding yet. And so, we're going to have to implement some kind of a system. And dummy me, I raised my hand and volunteered, and that was my first document management administrative job. So, and what amazes me actually is that I think people are more broken and less organized now than they were 27 or 28 years ago. If you don't have the history of being in the business that long, you may not agree with me, but. So let's go ahead and, I wrote this on one of my articles a couple of years back, and I got a lot of email about it, kind of agreeing with it. I would submit that when you're an administrator, the bulk of the problems you really deal with are psychology and user problems. I think the technology is fairly straightforward. Would you guys agree? Show of hands? Can I more or less agree with that? All right, how many of you come in and, and really cuss about the technology you're going to use today? Very few. How many of you come in and cuss about the user you're going to deal with today? There you go. So, it's funny, kind of poll the room, and that's kind of what everybody says. So document management to me is even worse than CAD because you're changing the way people organize and flow their work throughout the day. And, human beings tend not to change real well. Would you agree with that statement? Yeah. Now, you tell me what's harder, installing and configuring a software system or changing the way people work? Let's vote. How many people vote for changing the way people work is by far the hardest thing that we do? Beautiful. Great, because otherwise I was just going to drop the clicker and walk off. Systems of whatever sort, Adept, is at its heart a system. It is a collection of technology components that runs over a distributed network. You may have web services, you may not. But that whole collection or that whole ecosystem is really what allows you to change the way people function and work in your environment. And what I want to do with this talk is give you some ideas for how you can kind of optimize that experience. These are all things that I've discovered that I've had to do as a system administrator over the years that I've found that have worked for me. It doesn't mean it's magic, but I hope everybody can take some of that and use it to your advantage so that we can start changing people's behavior over time and eventually get to a better implementation. What I like to do is I like to think of a document management system like Adept as a functional pyramid. Essentially, what I see that the core problem is especially with a lot of senior management groups, what they want to do is they want to get in and they want to start doing some extremely high-end functionality immediately, but they never address the basic X's and O's and blocking and tackling of getting everything organized at the beginning of it. And I'm seeing some heads nodding. So, I've actually had a guy tell me, I just want it to work like Google. I just want to type something in and I want the drawing to pop up. And I said, well, do you not understand how many buildings full of servers and analysts and programmers it takes to make Google work? You know, to catalog and index all that data? They really don't get it. So I think you have to pay specific attention, you know, to getting the base functionalities of the system really working. And I realize I'm preaching to the choir in this room because that's what all you guys do. I get it, but I just want to state that for completeness. What we're going to try to do is build a strong base on basic functions, and we're going to try to get people to actually get trained in that manner and use the system in that manner without having to beat them over the head to do it. Hopefully we're going to motivate them to actually want to work in this way. So we'll see what you think of some of those ideas. I think the core challenge is not so much to make the one change. Probably many of us in this room got Adept and did an initial implementation and got to some point, and then a lot of us stopped. Anybody have this problem? You hit organizational barriers or whatever, you're not budgeted to continue, or you know, there's IT issues or whatever. The real challenge is to keep going with it, you know, and to have a psychology and a culture where people continually want to get better. And that's what I initially, you know, really want to do with the system. So I was talking to Nick last night at the table, and he said, you know, what I am always aiming for is complete adoption of the system, full utilization of the functions and tools that are available to me. And that's a great way to put it. So thank you, credit given. You basically want to implement everything on that pyramid as you can get to it. But in order to do that, now that sounds great, okay? But in order to do that, what steps do you have to go through? What sort of actions do you have to take to get there? So I'll ask the fundamental question. Why is it so hard to change the way people work? Any ideas? Anybody just want to blurt something out? No? Yeah, there it is. Yeah, look. Go ahead. Yeah, plain old incompetency also. I've seen that. Yes.
From a more positive perspective, what they have works today.
Yes, exactly. Now it may be hideously inefficient, but it works. And that's the way I've always done it, which is not a reason, that's an excuse. But yeah, all these things are very valid. So I claim that just human beings they suffer from mental inertia. You know, it's like pushing a car from a dead stop. Getting somebody to change the way they do things is difficult because you have to get people off, how have I always done it? Another thing about people, human beings, is that they get into functional habits. We all do this. You know, I gotta have my coffee in the morning. It's a habit, really. You know, I could break myself of it if I wanted to, I guess, but you know, it would be difficult. Now, that's good and bad. Because if you get people out of their bad habit and get them into a good one, then habitual behavior works to your advantage. So there's two sides of that coin, and I want to talk about that a little bit. This is a big one that I see in companies, is that the we can't afford to change how we operate problem. Software costs money. Training costs money. Yeah. Any of you hit any of these barriers? I'm guessing most people here are probably technically pretty progressive, or you wouldn't be here in the first place. But I've certainly had management teams tell me we can't afford that. The management simply won't go for it problem. I'm guessing most of you have had at least some good luck in getting over that hurdle, or you wouldn't have Adept implemented and you probably wouldn't be here. But changing behavior really is also a function of management approval. What I like to do is acknowledge these problems. Huge attitudinal difference. If you come in the morning, God, my users won't do this stuff. My boss won't do this. I hate this. What kind of day are you going to have? Right? But if I walk in and say, okay, you know, these are the challenges I'm facing today, and this is how human beings operate, and how am I going to persuade them to change their behavior, at least I start the day in a positive note, and I have a better chance to get someplace. So that's the first psychological tip I'd give you, because I used to just beat my head against the desk on a daily basis. So what I do is I just acknowledge, you know, that these things exist. We get that out in the open and start, you know, talking to the boss about why can't we do things like this, talking to people. So, you know, it is negative. Everything that I just said speaks to kind of the negative side of human behavior. And so it kind of sounds like a downer. And I get that, because it can be if you don't tackle it the right way. So a reasonable thing to talk about at this point is, how do I start overcoming these negative problems or these negative mindsets? Okay, use what people are going to give you anyway. Here's what I mean by that. Human beings are lazy. Now, in a technical and CAD environment, I call my laziness productivity. Right? But it's all motivated by, I want to get my job done with as good or better quality than I'm presently doing it, but I want to get it done quicker. Does anybody disagree with that? Do any of your users disagree with that? Not really. Here's the thing. When you go to somebody and say, I want you to change how you work, is that making things faster for them? They don't perceive it as it, right? They perceive it as a change. So how many of you use Microsoft Word? I'm going to take it away from you tomorrow morning and give you a brand new word processor you've never seen. How enthused are you about tomorrow morning? Not really, right? So there's no persuasion. So from an administrator's point of view, I was tremendously guilty of not understanding that. This is a great system. Don't you see how cool this is? Why wouldn't you want to use this? Ah, you're just lazy. Boom, boom, boom. Why wasn't I getting anywhere? Because I wasn't making things easier for the people that were going to use the system. And I wasn't out there evangelizing ease of use, ease of functionality. You have to make stuff non-threatening before people will use it. Would you agree? How many of you have all the time to do all the training and everything that you ultimately want to do? This is where no hands go up. All right, so you kind of have to pick your battles, right? You have to decide what it is you're going to do. But never, ever, ever underestimate the importance of making things easier for people to use. That's number one rule. You know, we can be as technically on top of things in this room. You know, this is probably like the nucleus of high-end Adept administrative experience in the whole planet sitting in the room, right? But when we go back, everybody else is not that way. So we really, really have to focus on that ease. Now, what I want to do, and I've had good success with this, so see whether you can do this in your organization. What I want to stress to people is, like, if you will use the components of the system that we give you, we'll train you on them, we'll make it easy to use, but if you will use this, here's what will happen. Things will become consistent. And when things become consistent and we actually know how to find things, we're not going to have incorrect revisions. You know, we're not going to have a lot of these problems that we've been, Don's going to talk about where he's had some of those difficulties. We're not going to be talking about those kinds of problems because everybody will be on the same page. And here's the other thing. If somebody says, well, you know, this system isn't perfect, you know, I say, you know what? You're right. I'm sure it's not perfect. There's always things that I can be doing better, configuring better. But here's the thing. If you'll use the system as it is, at least if there's a problem, it's a consistent problem, and those are easier to fix. Would you agree? How many of you like importing that spaghetti bowl of data where there's 10,000 files and no two are annotated the same way? Anybody ever had to deal with that? It's not fun, is it? If somebody had put the same stuff in the title blocks or used the same fields or the same attributes, it would have been a piece of cake to import, even though it may not have been the best way, but at least it would have been consistent. So I'm always out there preaching that. If you will simply use the system in its standard manner, everything will become much simpler to use over time because we won't have to deal with problems and errors. And most people are reasonable enough to buy that. There will be people who won't. We'll get to them later. Because that is dealing with problem or recalcitrant users is an issue. I get that. But most people will buy into this argument. So ease of use, we're striving for consistency. Let me make your life a little bit easier, a little bit more pleasant, and let's move things down the road to consistently getting easier, quicker, simpler to use. I want you to be a better engineer. I don't want you to waste 30 minutes trying to find something. That's a pretty persuasive argument. It's real hard to argue against that. So what I would encourage everybody to do, got some notepads, and I'm sure you guys have brought a pencil or what we call an analog data device. The funny thing about the pen, it has great battery life. It boots faster than anything, and it works just great. And paper. What I would say is scribble down some of the problems that you are facing in your current environment with your current implementation of Adept. I'll just throw out a few things, right? Bad data, are we having problems importing things? Did we acquire another business unit? How are we going to get their data pulled in? Those kinds of problems. Do we have simple, lack of adherence to procedures, people not using the system, working around the system, are these kind of problems we have? Down the road, are we looking for, different workflows for approvals, checkouts? Do we have monitoring folders? How are we dealing with remote workers? Are we doing change order packages? All these kinds of things that can potentially be document control problems. And then don't forget that you have to keep track of how you roll this stuff out and train it. That's a key problem as well. So you always have to be thinking about this stuff. I can't do this for you. I can't write this list for you because I don't work at your company, but you certainly can. You could probably start writing it right about now and be done in 5 minutes is my guess. You pretty much know what your challenges are. But there's value in getting it down on paper and trying to prioritize it, which we'll do here shortly. So this is up to you. The funny thing is that human behavior, if you don't have a set of goals or something to aim for, you pretty much just sit there just like you are today, and nothing much happens. So you might as well get your problems written down, get some mile markers out in front of you for things you're going to try to solve. Now here's where the magic occurs. When you write down some of the problems that you're having, I want you to try to think how many hours your organization is wasting because you have this problem. When I first started talking to you guys, there was a 3M used to do a landmark engineering study thing, and they said 35 minutes per day of every technical employee's workday is simply trying to find information. And I think that may even be worse today, honestly. If you think about, you're paying somebody $75,000 a year, and you're telling me you're going to pay them for a half hour out of every day to find electronic files? Do you know what that adds up to? Think about the cost of that to your organization. Now, sometimes I do get accused of being an accountant, but it's not by choice, it's out of necessity, because I find that this is the only way I can really go to the senior management teams and really get their attention. You understand how much money we're leaving on the table here by not using this system in the most efficient way possible? That does get their attention. Sum it per user, per office, per year, and a staggering cost starts to present itself. And most companies have never really thought about this. Why not? Well, because we've always done it the old way. We got Adept implemented, we kind of got it to the point where we wanted it to be, and we stopped. Well, now we're leaving all this efficiency on the table. Just because we have Adept in place doesn't mean we're using all its features or using it to its best capabilities. So that's kind of my bottom line question is, what are your problems? What are they costing you? If you have that information, you can now start changing behavior. What do you think? Will everybody commit to doing that? All right. You can start scribbling right now if you want. By the way, I neglected to mention one thing. In the middle of all your tables, you will see some index cards and such. If you have questions throughout this that we're going to deal with at the end during Q&A, feel free to scribble that down on an index card, and we'll take those up after a while. So this leads me organizationally to what I like to call the Dr. Phil moment. You ever watch Dr. Phil? How's that working for you, he always says. How are those broken processes really working for you in your organization? What problems do you continue to have? And I think what most companies will do, if they're honest, is they will admit, yes, we have problems. We have organizational things with handling our electronic files that could be done better. Absolutely could be done better. Well, why are we not tackling that? Why are we not taking on that challenge? A lot of times it's because you just refuse to confront how broken it is. You've been doing it that way so long, you're used to it. So why challenge that? So what I'm trying to do is just kind of give a good swift slap. Hey, come on. We've got these problems here. Let's deal with this. We've got a great tool in place that allows us to deal with it. Why don't we tackle it? So here's the thing motivationally that I would like for everybody to just kind of get organized on their own. First thing is understand the number one rule: time is money, right? Lost time is lost money. Walk into your boss's office and say, I've got a plan of attack here. If you will give me 2 months at 25% of my hourly workload, you give me 10 hours a week for 2 months, I'll save you $400,000 next year. Are they interested? If they're not, you probably have to be looking for another job, honestly. Right? So it's all about that. Realize that users are only interested in changing their behavior if you can save them time. But what's the relationship between those two items I just put on the screen? If I save the user time, what am I saving the company? Right? So it works in both ways. Management will only make changes if they see a saving or a return on their investment. So it is all about saving user time. Therefore, you cannot get the boss convinced until you get your users convinced. Would you agree? This is where I kind of get some puzzled looks. I claim that as an administrator, I serve two uniquely different groups of management. As an administrator, can your boss make your life difficult by not supporting you or funding you or allowing you to train people? Yeah? Does everybody follow where I'm going with this? But as an administrator, can your users fire you? Indirectly. That's the perfect answer. They can stop paying attention to you, absolutely. So for me to be an effective administrator at document control or CAD or anything, I have to get users to believe that I'm making their life easier. If they don't buy that, nothing else really much happens. But if I can get them to change their behavior and start saving the company time, I can take that to the boss and translate that time into money. Here's the thing I love about software systems, though. If you want to try to change somebody's behavior using a purely authoritarian approach, like walking up and whacking their knuckles or yelling at them, or threatening to fire them, it's real hard to change people's behavior. But a system is it's just the software, folks. I mean, I don't care, but that's how the software works. You see what I'm doing? I'm making the software the bad guy. And from an administrator's point of view, my psychology now becomes supporting the user, making their tasking simpler. And if there's anything that they want to complain about the software, because people always do, right? You could give people a perfect system. What are they going to do? They're going to complain because they want something to be 5 milliseconds faster in the viewer. There's always a complaint, always. All right? But as an administrator, we just want to be supporting people's ease of use. I see the software as the depersonalizing enforcement mechanism. It's not political. It's how the software works. Okay? How many of you support CAD users or have CAD people around your organization? Does anybody ever walk up to you and say, I don't like the way the AutoCAD line command works, I want you to change it? Does anybody argue about how Microsoft Word manipulates its amount? Nobody argues about that because that's the software and that's how it works. Well, why should Adept be any different? It's not. Yeah, so I'm perfectly happy to go to a user. Well, why does it work that way? I don't know. Why do you stop at a red light? I mean, it's the rules. And that line of reasoning actually pretty much works. Now, will it work on day one? No. You kind of got to grind people into compliance over time. But I argue if you put a system in front of them that makes their tasking easy, they may not like everything about the system, but it makes their life simpler, so they will use it. Does that make sense? How many of you are selling and evangelizing your Adept implementation in that manner? Few. You really ought to be. because it's psychologically, that is a much, much easier sell. And by the way, when you get the users on board with that, you can start tallying up that time you're saving, go to the boss, and the boss will be impressed enough that they'll say, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, maybe we should let you go on to the next phase of this. I will warn you though, when I first did this, I went to them, and we had so many problems. We had workflow problems around printing, around finding things, losing things, saving over the top of things. You know, I started tallying up all the time we were wasting, and the first thing my boss did, does anybody know the first thing my boss said to me? Can't be true. No way we can be that screwed up. Anybody ever had that moment? Yeah, he's nodding his head. Oh, we can't be that messed up. Yeah, we really are. You know, start asking around. So there may be some disbelief at first, but stay on it. Now, at this point, if you can get here, right to where we are now in the presentation, the psychology really does start to change. You've got a user base that tends to believe you, that tends to think you're on their side, that you're trying to make their life easier. You know, hey, he hasn't lied to me yet, you know, so I guess I'll, you know, look at what he's putting in front of me tomorrow and give it a try. Once you can get to that place, your users are on board with you, they trust you, management sees you making some progress, so they're more likely, more receptive to letting you make further changes. So this is all good stuff. The key is not to get here and quit, because once you've got to this point psychologically, you want to take advantage of it, you want to keep rolling. You know, and you really want to make things noticeably better, okay? So what I like to call quick, sequential, go for the quick win, okay? Eliminate your simplest problems. Remember that list I had you write down? You're going to go back to that list and you're going to say, what's the easiest one for me to fix? These tend to be things that can be easily remedied with training, basic procedures. It's amazing. Do any of you guys make like a little laminated cheat sheet that you put on the side of people's monitors for function keys, things like that? It is amazing how little things like that will cement behaviors, teach shortcuts. And here's the thing, if you give people a simple fix for something and train them on how to use it that one way, an amazing thing occurs. If you teach somebody how to do something, they actually might do it that way. So easy wins typically, training, simple tweaks, simple things, you know, removing clicks and picks as best you can. You may not be gaining a whole lot of Adept functionality, honestly, but you're getting better compliance, and you're getting people who are now more willing to dive deeper into the software, and they're probably going to believe you more next time. So start working your way down the list from easy, moving to harder. What this does is it solves the greatest number of simple problems for the greatest number of people, which saves you lots of time. And time is money. So the boss is going to like that. Sell this approach to your users, do the math, total everything up in terms of what you're saving and how this little training session, hey, you know, it took me 4 hours to get ready for this training session. It took me, I had to go spend $100 at Kinko's to laminate these cheat sheet cards. So for the cost of a few $100s, we've now saved 40 people in our organization an hour a week. And that's a return that just, we keep reaping. Total that math up, take that to the boss. Remember I said I report to 2 different bosses, users and management? Please notice how I approach each group. So when I approach the user base, it's all about simplicity. I talk to the boss, it's all about money. Do you guys do this? I'm seeing some heads nodding. If not, yeah, that's accounting. I don't care about that. Yeah, learn to care about it because it really works. Now, as you're trying to put some of these changes in place, let's talk about the people you deal with on a day in, day out basis. How many of you have perfect users who always do exactly what they're told and never argue about standards or procedures? I see one guy coughing back there. I see no hands going up so far. Anybody have recalcitrant or problem users who work around the system? Honestly though, how many of you operate in an environment where most people are pretty good, few problems? Is that kind of the norm? I'm not seeing as many hands go up there as I might have wanted to. Look around your organization and find the following personas. I promise there's a reason I'm going to ask you to do this. The do-it-better people. They're looking for ways to constantly do things better. They're always motivated by efficiency. These are the CAD folks who are making their own toolbars, who are really trying to do things optimally. These people are typically not your problem because they're motivated to get things done in a better way. Now, sometimes I wish I could get them to quit noodling with the software, but that's a frustration item that I personally have. Okay. A great number of people in most organizations I work with are convince me people, or they're from Missouri, show me. All right? I might believe you, but you better convince me why this is better for me. You're going to have to show me. The leave me alone persona really doesn't want to hear about it, right? You guys have these? Because I'm seeing a few people. You only laugh if it's true. So I always can look around a room and tell who has these problems. I just want to get my job done, people. Which one is your greatest friend, and which one is your biggest enemy?
Depends upon where you are in the product life cycle.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. If you're in a very mature company that's been doing this for a long time, you just want people to use it. So those people, the kind of the do-it-better persona that might want to noodle with things can become problematic. You're correct. In most organizations, though, I don't see us using 20% of the tool. I'm not picking on Adept. I'm just talking about AutoCAD's the same way. Most people show up at work and they use 18 AutoCAD commands. There's 873 commands, and they're going to use 18 of them. They're doing it the same way they did 20 years ago. It's kind of the way there's always room to do things better, I think. At least I've not worked for a company that has everything perfect with no room to improve. I don't know, you can have a discussion and we can have 5 people give 5 different answers and they may be all right, within your company. Yes?
I might want to add one. We found a lot of success in trying to find someone who wants to make a mark so they can get promoted.
Yep.
Right? They want to be associated with some rollout of a significant event.
Yep.
So they can get their visibility.
Yeah. Probably most of us were kind of that person. I'm guessing, or you wanted to see it done well. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and give you kind of my conclusion on this. So take it with a grain of salt. You may disagree or whatever, but I'm at least going to tell you my line of thinking. The people that I have really come to enjoy more than anything else are the convince me's, because they do have an open mind. They will look at it, but once you convince them and it works, they will simply use it, and then they won't mess with it, which is pretty much exactly what I want. The people that I tend to have the most arguments with are the do-it-better persona, because they're always wanting to change how it works. And then, of course, there's the leave-me-alone persona who doesn't ever want to comply or do anything the right way. So they're problems, and you got to deal with them. That's my take on it. I do think it is worth your while. We can do a little exercise. I can say, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about the people you interact with on a daily basis and start labeling them by persona. And it emerges, the picture emerges fairly quickly. And that's going to have a great deal to do with how I approach system changes, which I'll be showing you here momentarily. How many of you are aware of Deming theory? You can get a few. Everybody ought to know this stuff. If you don't know who Edwards Deming is, by the way, he is an industrial efficiency expert. He's basically like the father of Lean, Six Sigma, all this kind of stuff. We emerged after World War II in the United States, and this guy said, we need to modernize our industrial practices so that we can manufacture competitively, and we just said, we don't care. You know, we're going to run our companies the same way we've always run them. And where did the guy go? He went to Japan. What happened with Japanese manufacturing? All right, so this guy knows what he's talking about. I mean, they embraced him almost like a rock star. It's like the Beatles, coming to Tokyo. And people in this country don't even know who he is. So he invented this thing called the Deming cycle, which you see in this graphic. And I won't belabor the point, but basically what it says is if you want your organization to get better, or if you want your Adept implementation to become better, over time, it's not an accident. It's a process. And here's how that process works. What you're going to do is plan for a new feature or change or component. You're then going to put it in place by doing some functional testing. You're then going to check it or validate it to make sure it performed the way you thought it was going to perform. You're then going to take any corrective action that may need to be taken to finalize that system component change, and then you're done. Do you stop there? No, you go through it again, and again, and again, and again, till the system just continually gets better, continuous improvement. So how many of you are trying to do this in your Adept implementation? Constantly roll out better features, try to make things better, quicker, simpler. That's really what, and it's kind of to Nick's point, I want to adopt everything. Here's the thing. When you are planning how to change your Adept implementation, go to the convince me people and say, what causes you pain on a daily basis? Will they tell you? Oh yeah. That's typically not the problem. Okay, so tell me what's causing you pain. Well, what's causing me pain is we bought this company 3 years ago and we loaded all our stuff over here into a library and it's not organized optimally and I can't always find everything. Okay, what do I need to fix for you to make that go away? Listen to them. Because remember, they're not technical noodlers, they just want to get their job done. So listen to these folks and they'll give you the plan, essentially. Now, when it comes time to actually put this in place and see if it works, go to the I just want to get my job done people and have them try it. Now, why do I have them validate as opposed to the technical noodler or the I always want to do things better persona? This person will give you a truthful, plain, unvarnished, yes, that works, or no, it doesn't. Or it almost works if we could solve this one problem. That feedback's invaluable. And I don't like to go to people who are real like I wouldn't do that stage of validation testing with like my highest end API programmer because they're going to want to change 28 things. I've already planned what I'm trying to do. I want to see whether this will actually work. Now, when it comes down to checking and validation, that's where you want to get the do it better people involved. Because they might genuinely see how you could maybe noodle with it a little bit and tweak it. Any corrective action that has to be taken typically is going to require somebody to sign off on something. And that's usually the boss. So the whole way through this process, I have to make sure my boss, whether that's the IT director or the engineering manager, whoever it is, I gotta make sure they know what I'm doing. What new stuff we're rolling out, the testing or validation that I've performed, and here's what I'm going to need. So maybe the corrective action is we need to up our bandwidth to use web client services. Well, maybe that, they're going to have to budget for that. So you notice that I'm keeping everybody in the loop. Who did I leave out, by the way? The leave me alone people. I had not talked about them. I have not included them. I left them alone. That's what they want. Yeah. Now, I have had bosses tell me, Oh no, you want to do your testing and validation with the most skeptical people in the room, because if you can convince them, then clearly it will work. Well, I mean, you ever see the old Life cereal commercial? It's Mikey, he hates everything, right? I mean, there's those people out there. And I almost don't care what you do, they're not going to be happy, they're not going to use it. So I'm not going to waste a lot of resources dealing with those folks. I'm going to take the people who want to get their work done, want to get things done optimally. I'm going to run through system changes that way. You know, I'm going to do my basic training. I'm going to get people on board, and then I'm going to get on to the next tweak and the next improvement. So what am I telling you to do? To ignore people who won't comply with the system? How do you guys deal with the problem user?
A lot of times, I just want to get my job done or convince me, people have a lot of influence in the rest of their life.
I like where you're going.
And if you can get those people on board, sometimes the other people will.
Yes. Basically what you are doing is inverse peer pressure, right? Peer pressure typically leads to worse behavior. In this particular case, I'm going to use peer pressure, peer influence, to raise the bar and get these people to actually use the system the right way. Here's what I've always observed about people who won't use the system. System doesn't work. What's my argument? Sure does, all these people are using it. That procedure is not optimal. Well, really, that's kind of funny because everybody we had in our testing group thought it was. See what I'm doing? Yes?
I use the Custard's Last Stand. The Indian Circle, my director, and then we attack.
the cool thing.
And he knows it.
Yeah.
And I told him that this
Yeah.
is our last stand. We're going to circle you and then we're going to go after you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's the thing that I love about systems, you know, software systems, is that you get a simple enough behavior put in place in the system. Most people use it because it's easier to use. I can now, just by sheer war of attrition over time, I can just grind these people into compliance because their rogue behavior isn't helping anybody else. But yeah, I like what you're saying. So it's almost like an intervention. In a way. There you go. I like it. Yeah. Apprenticeship works nicely. You know, you put somebody who's that. There are people, yeah. Yes. Yeah. But I do think there's a point, I mean, it's like if you have somebody who's bad enough, you'll eventually fire them, right? Well, I mean, if somebody's exhibiting negative behavior, what you do is you put them in an environment where everybody else is acting appropriately, and you kind of hope they get with the program. You know, I may need to give them a little care and feeding or attention, but most people do eventually come around. I've seen a few that haven't, and I've seen some people get fired. But for the most part, I think you just embrace the people in your organization, the personas in your organization who are going to help you roll the system out. And you just let them kind of bring everybody else along over time. It's far better than fighting with people, I think. Okay. Using this Deming cycle, or classic, the Deming cycle of functional improvement, and we put that up against the functional pyramid that I had way earlier in the presentation. What I am trying to do via somewhat clever psychology is I'm trying to go to my user base and I'm trying to find out where their problems and pain points are, and they tend to be fairly simple. For the most, it's what I've noticed. I think about whatever kinds of problems that I need to solve or whatever I need to do with my implementation, and I'm always checking that off against this kind of functional pyramid. And what I've done on this functional pyramid, to me, I mean, we could define this in almost any way, but to me, the fundamentals of a system like Adept is that you can search, find, and not lose stuff. And until you're doing that, you really don't have control anyway. Once everybody's agreed that this is where our documents live, now you can start using that tool to blast into things and revise and edit and manage CAD tools and extract attributes from files, do a whole lot more cool stuff. But you can't do that until you get the basics put in place. So as I'm doing this functional changing, I'm always considering, have I built the base of the pyramid yet? Am I now working up to the next tier? Am I going up to the next tier, to the next tier? And I claim that even if you had 2 to 3 years to work through and get this thing perfectly done, you'd never be done, because what's Autodesk going to do to you? What's SolidWorks going to do to you? What are internet topology changes? What's Microsoft going to do to us? I mean, you're never done, right? I don't think anybody in this room, if you do a really good job with this, I've heard people say, well, if I get it working too well, they don't need me anymore. Nah, I don't think so. You'll always be busy. And the better job you do at that, actually, the more people love you, the less likely you are to be gone, I think. So solve the easy stuff first. Move up to, classically, application integration is where I see most of it. So really being able to data mine and pull things out of the files that you manage, in addition to the classic revision management, those types of things. As that becomes more and more consistent, as people are manipulating their CAD files and bill of materials files, and they're taking digital pictures and they're throwing all this stuff in project files, it now becomes easier to start thinking about moving packages of documents around and really using the workflow functionality that's within Adept. But if you think you can go out and haphazardly load 10 years of bad stuff that's not well categorized or cataloged and have this big spaghetti bowl of data that makes no sense whatsoever, if you think you're going to go from that to moving around ECO packages in a week, you're fundamentally misled, or somebody doesn't understand what the scope of the system is. So always looking at that base, is our data in good order? Can we find things? If I do this consistently over time, the culture has changed enough now. They're accepting enough of standard methodologies. They're accepting enough of training and things that I put in front of them that the big changes are now possible. And it doesn't happen automatically. By the way, what's the time scale, if you had to guess? What's the time scale in a company to totally change the way people work, organize their tools? I've observed it takes about 2 years. Yeah. If you can put in a system like Adept and go from migrating initial training to really being productive and doing all these high-end functions, if you can do that in 2 years, man, that's fantastic. There's probably many people in this room who've been using it for much longer than that and haven't made it that far up the pyramid, right? How many of you do fully implemented Adept, using every single piece and nook and cranny of it? Sort of. No hands go up. Yeah, so we all have this problem. I think the ultimate, kind of the holy grail for me is getting this thing to tie into other business systems. And I know that's a big emphasis for 2017. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And I think we all need to be evangelists of this system needs to be something that's more widely embraced. It's not just for CAD. It's not just for the engineering group. It's something that everybody in the organization can be using. Feel strongly about that. Couple points. If you do this consistently and you get this culture in place where people are wanting to use standard tools, where they're accepting of standard practices, where they're at least optimistic when you roll out new changes in functionality, it's not like oh man, not that again. They're like, oh cool, what's going to make my life easier next week? If you can get to that point, is that good for the organization? I think it is. I mean, I think it's going to give us higher productivity. We're going to spend less time on mundane tasks like finding stuff or routing things. Okay? You tell, this just kills me. Why is it that we hire somebody, we pay them $80,000 a year, we put them in front of, there's $20,000 worth of software on the computer that's in front of them, and then we just hope they send the right file to the right person? A few little snickers, but isn't that how it works? It really is. I don't get it, right? And I think it's probably because a lot of us aren't evangelizing that. We're not out saying that enough, honestly. I'm in document management sales is the way I look at it. If I'm an administrator, I have to get people to see the value of it. I better be the biggest advocate of that technology in the building, because if I don't believe in it and if I'm not optimistic about it, nobody else is going to be. So if you drive that degree of change and acceptance into your user base, it's going to be good for them. It'll be good for the organization. I think you're going to get better functional teams. You're going to see people getting in groups together and doing things in like ways. You start to see really cool things like my civil engineering department and my electrical guys who never talk to each other because they're in two different buildings are now unified by being able to swap files over a consistent system. You can unify groups, you can unify departments, you can bring branch offices in and control things in a much better way than sending 1 million emails over or having unsynchronized drop boxes or any one of these other nightmare scenarios that we deal with in file synchronization. It really is all about gaining efficiency and a platform for standardization that will allow us to keep raising the bar year over year to use better tools, better technical innovation. All right? It's kind of the interesting thing. I mean, could you even fathom a company making a serious argument now that we should be using a drawing board instead of CAD? I mean, you just kind of laugh, right? Well, there was a lot of that thinking 25 years ago, believe me. What happened to the people who were really, really late to the party? They suffered. They lost project work. They were not in a position where they could absorb the new technological leverage that's coming their way. Don't let this happen to your company by not leveraging all the tools and technology you have available. Now, will you implement everything in Adept? Probably not. Probably nobody ever will. But are you looking at it critically and deciding what components really speak to your company and your needs and trying to get in a position where you can take advantage of it? I hope so. You're going to be a problem solver. You're making people's daily experiences better, so it's a better environment to work in. Things get screwed up less, which means people aren't stressed as much. It's kind of a cascading series of positive events as you get this done. Is that going to have positive career impact for you? I think so. Interesting, I work with people who administer document control systems, CAD managers. I work with IT managers. And the things that I've noticed is the people who can get into these complex systems, get a game plan, do cool things over an extended period of time, and get users to support them, that is the best recipe for getting promoted that I can possibly think of. I mean, you think about it. How many people do you know, really, who are technically gifted, who can communicate? Does everybody have somebody in your office who's technically brilliant but can't find his car keys? You ever work for somebody who's like hugely motivating and you'll walk over hot coals for this dude, but he couldn't turn on a computer if his life depended on it? How many people do you know who can do both? Those of us in this room have kind of an interesting career perspective. We are technological communicators. And if you can do that, you're promotable. I see it happen a lot, really. I mean, this is a hard job. Seriously, does anybody find this job easy? Because I don't. But it is definitely something that can lead, to cool things for you down the road. And it just kind of naturally occurs. So the things that I would recommend to anybody, just kind of on that career note, kind of getting off the group psychology now, but just a little bit more self-motivated here. Keep your eye on the ball. Be solutions focused, because if you do that, you'll solve problems for people, which will only be positive. And it's good for the company financially as well. Don't forget to build your management skills. As an administrator, I would always say that, be able to keep track of some basic money stuff, understand what the budget's going to be for next year. Don't say, that's somebody else's problem. That's an accountant. Don't say that. Try to be cognizant of the management piece of it. My goal is to become the technical hero for my users. All right? I want you to envision like a day where maybe you go to another company or something like that, and it's your last day at work, and you're kind of sending away lunch. Every single person that uses your system should be at your lunch. Kind of makes sense? You should be that valuable to everybody who uses your system. If you do that, you're golden. Your boss will see that. Your management teams will see that, I promise. What we're going to do is kind of do some questions. We got a few minutes left over. So I don't know if anybody has anything written down or if we just want to do it more by show of hands. Did everybody get a few actionable ideas or things that they can use when they get home? I'm just interested. Yep. Yes? Did I give you a positive return on your time investment this morning? All right, that's what we want. Okay, so are we going to do we got any index cards coming in, or do we want to just do questions from the floor? Maybe just questions, okay? Scott has
Is this working? Yep, there we go.
Scott has the roving mic. Anyone?
Any questions for Bob?
That's actually interesting just about what you were saying. A lot of what you're saying is kind of the downstream problems that you have.
Right.
Finding old data, finding things that existed. I have kind of the opposite problem. It's creating an upstream information to get it out of that part of those people. And there's just as many barriers to knowledge. People want the information in a certain format. They've always got it that way. I mean, 5 different spreadsheets with 5 different people because everybody wants to see it.
Right. That's kind of the human condition. Yeah, but
it goes in both directions.
Yeah.
And there's opportunities for this to fix it all.
Well, kind of the way that I approach stuff like that is I'll go ahead and take a first crack at it. What I did earlier in my career was I would try to go to the 5 different people and I would try to get them to agree on something, and they never did. So the methodology I've adopted is I'm going to take what I've heard from people, kind of some of their core gripes and complaints, and I'm going to put something together that I think will maybe hit about 80% of what they want, and then I'll actually put it in front of them. So I'm using convince me logic as opposed to, because 5 people who want 5 different spreadsheets, you're now talking about the do it better persona. And those 5 people will never agree. So just take a first cut at it, and I view document management systems in much the same way. You're never going to make everybody happy, you just aren't. But what I'm trying to do is provide the greatest common denominator of functionality for the greatest number of people, and if it becomes simpler for them to use that, they will.
That's kind of the philosophy.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like people are used to doing a straight line down. I noticed a lot of deal with bill of materials here. Straight line bill of materials, every item has a bill going to a configured system. I had to create something that just dumped it into it.
Right.
Because nobody was going to agree on accepting it simply.
Yeah. And designing, because at its heart, Adept it's a database platform, really. So when you talk about, well, what are you going to need to keep track of? You ask people a question, and invariably you put the first iteration of the system out there, and that's when you find out what people really wanted. You guys have this experience? Nobody ever tells you what they want with any specificity until you put it in front of them and have it fail. For whatever reason. And I used to get mad about that. Now okay, that's the way it is. Don't take it personally. Yeah. I spend less time being frustrated that way. I just acknowledge and accept human behavior for what it is, which is everybody wants things. You know, standards are great so long as they're mine, right? And you kind of have to break that psychology. Yeah, one there.
Good morning. Can you share any experiences you may have had if you are associated with an organization that has unique sales divisions, manufacturing divisions, production, maintenance, engineering, and it's all run by a person who drives sales? And you're in engineering trying to develop and promote the importance of document management. And yes, there's the dollars that you share and exploit,
Right.
but it's also a world of psychology, as you state. Have you ever been in those positions where you have to try to go beyond the, let's say, the engineering management level who is so busy they don't always care about these issues because they have their own agendas, yet you have to convince levels above that of the need to grow and develop and monopolize this set of tools?
Yeah, and it's common. I mean, I see most technical organizations are actually spearheaded by sales. It's my observation, because if you're not selling something, you know, none of us have a job anyway. So that's correct, actually. The core problem I see with the sales, as engineering folks, which is, I guess, kind of what most of us are, you know, we're kind of like, you know, it needs to be done in a certain way. There's a procedure, you know, things got to be tested. We have that type of mindset. The sales guys just sell it, which is a different persona. So what I try to do is I try to just show them, if we do things using this tool in a standardized sort of way, we can discuss what the standard is. I don't care, it doesn't have to be my standard. But if you expect us to, if you expect to call me at 11:43 and say, I got a presentation at 1 o'clock and I need 94 renderings for that presentation, you know, 67 minutes from now, I might be able to do that if we know where all the files are and I can get enough computers on it. But if it's going to take me 67 minutes to even go find what you're talking about, there's no way I'm ever going to meet that expectation. I find arguments like that work. You know, they don't think that way, but if you present it to them in just that way, they actually will tend to see it.
Like anything, you have to put yourself in their mindset and find out what's beneficial.
Yeah.
How they visualize.
Sales guys spend their whole life trying to get somebody to say yes. And engineers are pretty much I'm going to tell you why you can't do that. If you think about it, right? As a bridge engineer, well, can't we just, you know, make this a lot lighter? No, because the car is going to fall through it. So technical people are always saying no to stuff. Sales guys just want to hear a yes. So what I've tried to do is give them, I'll tell you yes, but under these conditions and constraints. And if you can live with this, you know, then we'll do what you want. And I find that it works, that it doesn't work immediately, but you can, over a 6 to 12 month period of constantly reinforcing that, you can get there. I know that's not a magic answer for you, but that's how I tend to approach it. Got anything else? Because I think I'm.
Yeah, one more
right
question if we have it. Anybody?
Nope. Going once, going twice. Okay. I guess we're done. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob.